Daddy.
Hi.
Have you ever watched a billionaire freeze like his entire world stopped breathing? That's the moment we're stepping into right now. No warm-up, no gentle entry, just impact. The front door of Harbor Jewels swung open with a soft chime, and the instant Charles Bennett stepped inside, the air around him tightened. 1 second he was a confident Baltimore powerhouse, tailored suit, steady stride, mind focused on buying an engagement ring. The next second, his entire body halted mid-step, as if his soul got yanked straight out of him. Because right there, behind the counter, holding a little girl, stood Regina. Her, the woman Charles once vowed to love forever, the woman he lost, the woman he never stopped thinking about, even when he pretended he had. And she wasn't alone. Regina's daughter, a tiny girl with warm brown skin and tight curls shaped into soft puffs, stared right at him with curious eyes. Her small fingers clutched a toy giraffe, and her legs swung gently as she sat comfortably in her mother's arms. The store felt too quiet, too still. Then it happened. The little girl lifted her hand, pointed at him, and said with pure innocence, "Daddy?" If you're watching this right now, I want you to take a moment and ask yourself, what would you do if the past you ran from stared you right in the face? Because Charles didn't move. He couldn't. It was as if someone pressed pause on his entire life. His breath caught. His chest tightened. His fingers twitched at his side, but he couldn't lift a hand, couldn't blink, couldn't pretend this wasn't happening. The engagement ring he planned to buy suddenly felt like a heavy stone inside his chest. Regina's lips parted slightly. Her eyes flickered, not with anger, not with softness, but with something far more complicated. Something earned through years of distance, silence, and unanswered questions. The girl, Nala, tilted her head, looking between them with the kind of curiosity only a child carries. No hesitation, no judgment, just truth spilled into the open, wrapped in a single word. Charles's throat tightened. His heart thudded loud enough for him to hear it in his ears. If shock had a face, it was his. Let me ask you this, and be honest with yourself. Have you ever tried your hardest to move forward, only for life to pull you right back into the past you thought you closed the door on? Ever faced a moment you weren't ready for, even though you thought you were in control? That's where Charles was standing, frozen in a quiet Baltimore jewelry store, with customers browsing nearby, and yet somehow the entire world seemed to shrink down to 3 people: Charles, Regina, and the child calling him Daddy. The kind of moment that doesn't give you time to prepare, the kind that demands answers you don't have. Regina adjusted her hold on Nala, trying to steady both herself and the situation. Her posture straightened. Her expression softened into polite professionalism, the only shield she had in that moment. But Charles saw the truth in her eyes. Shock, history, pain, and something unspoken sitting just beneath the surface. Before Charles could even form a thought, another voice chimed in from behind him. A familiar voice. Elise. "Charlie, are you okay? You just stopped walking." Her presence cracked the tension like glass under pressure. She stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor as she approached the counter, unaware of the emotional storm she was stepping directly into. Regina swallowed. Nala shifted in her arms. Charles remained frozen. In life, there are collisions you cannot ignore. Moments that stand in the doorway and refuse to let you pass. This was one of them. Welcome to Mr. Graham Stories, where we share impactful life lessons through memorable stories. If you're new, we're glad you're here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and join us for more inspiring stories. Elise reached the counter. Her eyes moved from Charles to Regina, then to the toddler perched comfortably in her arms. Her smile shrank. Confusion crept in. Regina, trying to maintain her role, asked gently, "May I help you?" Before anyone could answer, little Nala reached forward with curious excitement, grabbed the small velvet ring box Charles had been holding, and flipped it open with a delighted gasp. The sparkling diamond inside caught the store lights and scattered them across the counter. Regina's eyes widened. Elise's breath snagged. Charles felt the floor shift beneath him. That single motion, those tiny fingers snapping open the ring box, hit harder than anything else. The moment past and present collided with no warning. A ring meant for one woman, opened by the child of another. If that doesn't twist your stomach, keep watching. Because this story only gets deeper from here. Stay with me, because what happens after this moment will shake every person involved. And I promise, this story will touch your heart. Before we continue, do me a favor, like this video and comment where you're watching from. It helps YouTube push this story to more amazing viewers like you. When Nala opened that ring box, the room didn't simply shift. It tilted in a way that made everyone question what they thought they knew. But before we move deeper into that chaos, let me talk to you for a moment. Because stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're mirrors. They remind us of our own crossroads, our own regrets, and the moments life shook us awake. So let me ask you directly, have you ever tried to leave something behind, only for life to pull you right back into it? Maybe it was a relationship, maybe a mistake you thought you'd buried, maybe a dream you abandoned, or a person you convinced yourself you no longer needed. But then, out of nowhere, something snaps you back. That's where Charles is standing. Not physically, emotionally, right there in the middle of Harbor Jewels, frozen in the kind of moment you can't rehearse. He thought he was here to buy a ring and celebrate a new future. He thought he had outgrown his past. He thought he had healed from Regina. But you and I know something he didn't want to admit. You can't outrun what your heart never settled. And you can't outrun the people life meant for you. The air in the jewelry store didn't shift because of a diamond. The tension wasn't about Elise walking in. It was deeper, older, rooted in years of unresolved history. Because the truth is, Charles and Regina didn't simply separate. They walked away carrying pieces of each other they never returned. You ever been there? Where you move on physically, but emotionally something stays behind? Maybe you didn't talk about it. Maybe you didn't even want to. Maybe you told yourself, I'm fine, because it was easier than admitting the ache you still carried. Charles did that. He became a CEO. He built a life most people only dream of. He made decisions with confidence, walked into meetings with authority, and shaped an empire with discipline. But none of that could erase the way his chest tightened whenever he passed the places where he once laughed with Regina, or the way silence felt heavier on some nights, or the way he avoided conversations about family because he didn't want to admit he had broken his. So let me ask you again, have you ever had a moment you weren't ready for, even though you thought you were? Because readiness isn't about timing, it's about truth. And Charles was standing face to face with the truth he avoided for 3 years. Regina wasn't just an ex-wife. She was the dream he mishandled, the promise he failed to protect, the chapter he closed without understanding how much he would regret it. And Nala wasn't just a child. She was the living reminder of everything he lost, everything he ignored, everything he didn't realize he needed until it stared him in the face and called him Daddy. There's a kind of ache that doesn't scream. It whispers. It settles quietly in your chest until something forces you to hear it. Charles heard it that day. He didn't expect to. He didn't come prepared for it. He didn't walk into Harbor Jewels expecting his past, his mistakes, and his unfinished love to collide with his present. But life doesn't always wait for our permission. Life breaks into our plans and rewrites the script. And here's the truth. Regina wasn't expecting this moment either. She held herself stiff, not because she didn't feel anything, but because she felt too much. Years of healing, years of independence, years of raising Nala alone while trying to convince herself she made the right choice. And suddenly, he was standing 10 feet away, engagement ring in hand, looking like the man she once trusted with her entire world. Regina wasn't ready for this. Let me ask you, viewer watching from wherever you are, have you ever faced a person who brought back every emotion you thought you layered neatly in the past? That's the connection right here. That's why this moment hits so hard. Because we've all carried regret. We've all carried love we didn't know how to protect. We've all carried the weight of choices we wish we made differently. Regina and Charles were two people carrying years of buried emotion, now forced into a space too small to hide it. And guess what? This is only the beginning. Because the real storm didn't hit when Charles froze. It hit when Elise stepped closer, standing between the life he planned and the life he abandoned. But that's coming in the next moments. For now, understand this. This story isn't just about romance. It's about timing, about choices, about second chances life throws at you even when you think you've missed your opportunity. It's about heartbreak that shaped two very different lives. And a little girl whose innocent voice cracked open a door neither parent expected to walk through again. And as we move into the next part, things are about to get even more intense. Because when the present and the past collide in the same room, somebody always gets hurt. If you've ever watched someone try to keep their life together while everything around them shifts in ways they didn't expect, then you know exactly what this moment feels like. Because right now, Charles isn't standing in a jewelry store. He's standing in the center of a collision, past, present, and future pulling him in 3 different directions. Elise finally stepped beside him, her expression tightening as she tried to understand what was happening. From her angle, she saw a friendly store clerk and a child who shouldn't be involved with a stranger's engagement ring. But what she didn't see, what only you and I can see, is the emotional current running between Charles and Regina. A current 3 years strong, still alive despite the distance, despite the arguments, despite everything that broke them apart. Regina held on to professionalism like it was armor. But her eyes, they betrayed her. She didn't look at Charles like he was just a customer. She looked at him like he was a chapter she never finished reading. Her breath hitched. Her shoulders stiffened. Her heart, though steady, carried weight. She knew this wasn't just a random visit. She knew this wasn't just another sale. She knew this moment was tied to a history she'd tried to heal from quietly, privately, without expecting closure. And Charles, still frozen, didn't know how to move forward or step away. Then, as if fate wanted to push the moment even further, little Nala grabbed the sparkling engagement ring box again. It slipped from Charles's hand earlier, and now it rested on the counter. Too shiny, too tempting for small, curious fingers. Nala pressed her thumb against the velvet lid and flipped it open once more. The diamond inside caught the overhead lights, scattering tiny glimmers across her cheeks. She giggled. You know how kids are. They find joy in the smallest things. They don't see tension. They don't see heartbreak. They only see something pretty and new. But adults, we see everything. Regina's eyes widened. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached to guide the box away, but Nala's little hand moved faster. She picked up the ring, held it up to Charles, and with the sweetest smile said, "Pretty." That single word hit like a punch to the chest. Elise's eyes darted to the ring. Her voice sharpened. "Charles, why does she—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Her mind filled in the blanks before the words formed. Meanwhile, Regina's training kicked in. She straightened, her voice steady even though her heart was thumping fast. "Sweetie, let Mommy hold that," she said softly, reaching for the ring. But Charles reached at the same time, their fingers brushing, sparking memories neither of them asked for. Not here, not now, not like this. Elise stepped closer, crossing her arms. "Someone want to explain what's going on? Because this doesn't feel like a normal shopping experience." Her tone wasn't rude, just startled, confused, maybe even hurt. And honestly, who could blame her? If you walked into a store with your partner, ready to plan a future together, and suddenly a child picked up your engagement ring while staring at your partner like she'd known him her whole life, you would have questions too. The tension grew thicker. Regina tried again to take the ring gently, but Nala, still oblivious to the emotional storm swirling around the adults, tilted. Her head, held it tighter, and whispered with a tiny smile, "Daddy ring?" That was it. Not loud, not dramatic, but emotionally explosive. Charles swallowed hard. His throat burned. His mind raced. Elise stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. Regina held Nala close, her face soft but worried, protective. You ever witnessed a moment where everyone in the room wants a different outcome? Elise wanted clarity. Regina wanted control of the situation. Nala wanted comfort. Charles wanted to disappear. Or rewind time. Or change everything he had broken. The store clerk in the back glanced nervously at the group, sensing the tension. A couple browsing earrings paused, pretending not to watch, but absolutely watching. Life doesn't pause to let you think. It doesn't offer warm-up rounds or rehearsals. It just throws moments at you and demands you respond. Elise took a slow breath. She looked at Regina, then back at Charles. "Who is this?" she asked quietly, trying to stay composed. Before Charles could speak, because honestly, he didn't know what to say, Regina stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said calmly, "I can still help you both find something today. Let me take care of the ring before it gets damaged." Her hand extended toward Charles, silently asking for him to let go of the moment too. But he didn't. He couldn't. He looked at Regina, then at Nala, then at Elise, and suddenly felt like a man drowning in a truth he had avoided for 3 years. Regina felt that hesitation. Elise saw it too. And you watching this, can feel it even more clearly than anyone in that store. This wasn't about a ring anymore. This wasn't about a simple shopping trip. This was a crossroads wrapped inside one uncomfortable, unavoidable moment. Nala climbed slightly onto the counter, reaching out for Regina. Her small voice broke through the silence. "Mommy." Regina lifted her gently. "It's okay, baby." But her eyes, they were locked on Charles, as if asking silently, "Are you going to say something? Anything? Do you even know what this moment means?" And Elise, still trying to hold on to composure, took a step back. Her breathing uneven as she studied Charles like the man she planned to marry suddenly carried secrets she didn't sign up for. This was the moment when past and present tangled so tightly that none of them could pretend anymore. This was the moment that forced truth into the room. This was the moment that changed everything. Stay with me, because what happens after this moment will shake every person involved. And I promise, this story will touch your heart. Before we move forward, do me one favor. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. It helps YouTube push this story to more amazing viewers like you. The moment Nala opened that engagement ring box, the entire store shifted. You could almost feel every set of eyes turn toward the counter, waiting for someone, anyone, to break the silence. But Charles couldn't move. Regina didn't breathe. Elise didn't blink. It was one of those moments when time doesn't slow down. It tightens. Charles's throat felt dry, as if all the air in the room had evaporated. His gaze locked onto the ring glistening in the toddler's hand, and every muscle in his body went rigid. You ever been caught between who you were and who you're pretending to be? That's exactly where he was standing. On one side of his life, Regina and Nala. On the other side, Elise and the future he was trying to force. Regina moved first. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tried to take the ring back from Nala without drawing more attention. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "let Mommy hold that." But her voice wasn't steady. Her composure wasn't perfect. Her eyes, usually so warm, were clouded with confusion, caution, and a quiet ache she tried to bury beneath professionalism. Nala giggled as she pulled the ring back, proud of her shiny treasure. Elise shifted beside Charles. "Why is she holding that?" she asked, her tone sharp but unsure. She wasn't accusing yet, not fully, but she sensed something wasn't right. Her eyes darted between Regina, the child, and Charles, searching for answers she wasn't prepared to receive. Charles opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His jaw clenched. His pulse hammered in his neck. His hand twitched as if wanting to retrieve the ring but refusing to step closer to Regina, closer to the truth. Suddenly, Nala's tiny fingers loosened, and the ring box slipped from her grasp. It fell, hit the marble floor, bounced once, twice, before landing near the edge of the glass display. That sharp clatter cracked the silence like a warning shot. Regina gasped and instinctively lunged to catch the falling box. In her rush, her elbow grazed one of the necklace trays. It tipped forward, sending several delicate chains spilling across the counter. They slid off the glass surface in slow motion, scattering like loose threads onto the floor. A customer browsing nearby jumped slightly. The store clerk across the room straightened with alarm. Even Elise stepped back, startled by the sudden burst of motion. "Sorry, I'm so sorry," Regina said quickly, crouching to gather the fallen pieces, her breath unsteady. She wasn't apologizing because she caused the mess. She was apologizing for the emotional collision that neither she nor Charles asked for but couldn't avoid. Charles snapped out of his daze long enough to drop to one knee and help scoop up the necklaces. His fingers brushed against Regina's, and for a split second, they both froze again. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't soft. It was jarring, like touching a memory that still stung. "Let me help," he murmured. Regina didn't look at him. "I've got it," she replied, her voice low but firm. She wasn't angry. She was protecting herself, protecting her daughter, protecting the fragile balance that moment threatened to break. Elise folded her arms, watching them with an expression edging closer to betrayal than confusion. "Charles," she said slowly, "is there something going on here?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air sharply enough to make both Charles and Regina wince. Charles stood, wiping his palms on his pants, trying to regain control of himself, of the situation, of anything. His jaw flexed and he forced his voice to steady. "It's fine. Let's just—" He stopped mid-sentence, the words falling apart before leaving his lips. Nala reached out toward Regina with both hands, sensing the rising tension. "Mommy," she murmured, leaning her cheek on Regina's shoulder. That soft plea grounded Regina. She took a steady breath, lifted Nala into her arms, and squared her shoulders. The professionalism returned, her shield against the storm swirling around her. "Mr. Bennett," she said, choosing formality like a wall between them. "If you still want to look at engagement rings, I can help you. Otherwise, another associate is available." Charles winced at the use of his last name. It was a reminder of 3 years of distance, a reminder of choices he couldn't undo. Elise raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Bennett," she echoed quietly, confusion blooming into suspicion. Charles didn't answer. He couldn't. He looked at Regina, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Her natural curls were softer now. Her eyes looked wiser and more tired. Her posture was stronger, grounded by motherhood and independence. He saw the woman he loved. He saw the woman he lost. He saw the family he abandoned without meaning to. And that realization hit him harder than any boardroom defeat. But he didn't have time to process it, because Nala leaned forward again, pointing at him with innocent curiosity. "Daddy," she whispered. Elise staggered back a step. Regina stiffened. Charles flinched. The air tightened. Elise's voice trembled. "Charles, what is she talking about?" Regina closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "Ma'am," she said calmly, "there seems to be a misunderstanding. Please allow us a moment." But Elise wasn't having it. "A misunderstanding?" she repeated, her tone rising. "A child just called my fiancé." She didn't finish. Charles took a step back. His chest tightened. His breath shortened. He looked at the ring box on the floor, still open, still shining, now heavy with a meaning he hadn't accounted for. He couldn't stay. He wasn't ready. Not for the questions. Not for the truth. Not for the past staring him in the face. Without another word, without looking at Regina or Elise or even Nala, Charles turned away from the counter. His footsteps were uneven, his breath shaky, his body tense. The door chimed as he pushed through it, stepping into the crisp Baltimore air. He didn't stop walking. He didn't slow down. He disappeared into the street, trying to outrun his own heart. Regina held Nala close, watching the man she once loved flee like he'd been hit by something invisible but devastating. Elise stood frozen, her eyes flickering between the counter and the door, as if trying to calculate what she had just witnessed. The store fell silent again. Not peaceful, not calm, just silent. A silence packed with everything unspoken. If you've ever had a moment trigger memories you thought you buried, then you'll understand what was happening inside Charles's mind the second he stepped out of Harbor Jewels. He leaned against a brick wall just outside the shop, breathing hard, the cold air cutting into his lungs. His heart was still racing, but it wasn't from running, it was from remembering, because seeing Regina again didn't just confuse him, it unlocked him. You ever have a memory hit you so hard that the present fades out for a second? That's what happened to him. The noise of the street dimmed, the sound of cars blurred, and suddenly, Baltimore wasn't today's city. It was yesterday's. He closed his eyes, and the past came rushing back. Years before he became a billionaire with endless meetings and impossible expectations, Charles stood behind a wooden podium at Morgan State University. He wasn't famous yet, but he was passionate, teaching young entrepreneurs about innovation, community, and building something meaningful. That was the first time he saw her. Regina sat in the 4th row, notebook resting on her knee, pen tapping lightly as she listened. But she wasn't just listening. She was watching him with a kind of focus that made him momentarily lose his place in his notes. She had a quiet confidence, a steady presence, a spark he couldn't explain. When the lecture ended, students gathered around him, asking questions, taking photos, shaking his hand. But Regina waited. She didn't rush. She didn't try too hard. She simply stood near the exit, thoughtful and patient. When the room finally cleared, she approached him with a small smile. "Your talk was inspiring," she said softly. "But I'm curious, what keeps you inspired?" No one had asked him that before, and something in him shifted. They ended up talking for nearly an hour, first in the lecture hall, then along the walkway outside campus. The air was warm. Students passed by laughing, music played faintly in the distance, and everything felt strangely effortless. Regina told him about her passion for jewelry design, about her community, her love for art, her dream to someday open a shop where people could feel seen and appreciated. Charles listened like he was hearing color for the first time. A week later, they met again. This time at an outdoor jazz concert near the Inner Harbor, an event Regina invited him to after shyly asking, "Do you like live music?" He didn't. Not really. Not before her. But he said yes. The night was warm, the sky a soft navy, and the harbor lights shimmered across the water. People sat on blankets, food trucks lined the walkway, and a saxophone floated a slow, soulful melody into the air. Regina stood beside him wearing a simple denim jacket and hoop earrings. Her curls were loose that night, tumbling around her face in a way that made it hard for him to look anywhere else. At one point, she started swaying gently to the music, eyes closed, letting the rhythm guide her. When she opened them, she caught him staring. "You don't dance?" she teased. "Not well," he admitted. "Good," she laughed. "Me neither." But she held out her hand anyway. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he realized something in that instant. If he touched her, he wouldn't want to stop. Still, he took her hand. They moved awkwardly at first, shy and careful, but gradually the space between them disappeared. Her laughter warmed him. Her scent, soft and floral, filled his lungs. Her smile made him forget the rest of the world existed. The saxophone hit a low, gentle note. Regina looked up at him with a sincerity that almost scared him. "You amaze me," he whispered, before he realized he'd spoken aloud. She paused. Then she said, "Close your eyes." He did, and she kissed him. A slow, heart-deep kiss that felt like a promise neither of them said out loud. People often talk about perfect weddings, but theirs wasn't perfect. It was real. A small ceremony in Baltimore where gospel voices blended with soft strings, where two different backgrounds met in the middle with tears and laughter. His friends sat beside her family. Her aunt read a poem. His mentor gave a toast. People stumbled over names and cultures, but no one cared. They were in love. They danced. They laughed. They held hands under the table like teenagers. The reception wasn't grand, but it was joyful. Fried chicken beside champagne flutes, neon lights next to elegant centerpieces. Regina's cousins teased Charles about being stiff. Charles's colleagues admired Regina's warmth. It was a celebration that looked like them, messy, beautiful, sincere. For a while, everything felt like sunlight. Love is powerful, but it isn't always enough to protect a relationship from life. Charles's career accelerated. His company grew fast. Meetings grew longer. Clients grew more demanding. Flights multiplied. Expectations soared. He kept telling Regina, "It's all for us, for the future." And she believed him, until believing started hurting. Regina stayed home after Nala's birth, promising herself it was temporary. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. She took care of Nala alone while Charles took calls in London, New York, San Francisco. He tried. He showed up when he could. He held Nala until she fell asleep. He kissed Regina's forehead and whispered, "I'll make it up to you." But promises don't raise babies. Promises don't replace presents. Promises don't fill empty chairs at dinner tables. Regina grew lonely. Charles grew exhausted. Conversations became short. Arguments became frequent. Silence became a third member of their marriage. And slowly, something broke between them. It was cold that evening, the kind of cold that makes windows fog and hearts feel heavy. Charles had just returned from Chicago, jet-lagged and stressed. Regina had been holding her frustrations for weeks, maybe months, and could no longer contain them. She told him she felt alone. He told her he felt unappreciated. She cried. He raised his voice. She said she needed partnership. He said he needed space. In anger, he regretted immediately. He muttered words he never should have said. Maybe we were moving too fast. Maybe you should focus on your path and I'll focus on mine. Regina stopped speaking. Her heart cracked, and the silence between them swallowed the rest of the night. That was the moment the marriage ended, not on paper, not legally, but emotionally. They separated soon after, filed quietly, hurt loudly, and when Charles walked out that door, he believed space would fix everything. Instead, it buried everything. When Charles stepped out of Harbor Jewels, the cold Baltimore air struck him harder than the embarrassment he carried on his face. He walked quickly, almost stumbling as he moved past tourists snapping photos of the waterfront, past joggers with earbuds in, past life going on as if his own hadn't just cracked open. He didn't slow down until he reached a bench overlooking the harbor. The water rippled gently against the pier, and boats rocked softly in the distance. He sat heavily, elbows on his knees, trying to steady his breathing. His hands shook. Not from shame, not from fear, but from realization. He thought forgetting Regina was the same as healing. He thought building a successful life meant he had built a meaningful one. He thought time would bury everything they didn't fix. But time didn't bury anything. It only waited for him to face it. Back inside the jewelry store, Regina gathered the fallen pieces of jewelry with slow, steady hands. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. She didn't let her emotions spill over. She had learned long ago that life doesn't pause for you to fall apart. Nala rested her head on Regina's shoulder as she worked, the little girl tapping her toy giraffe softly against Regina's arm. Customers resumed browsing, though a few cast curious glances her way. Regina ignored them. Her coworker approached quietly. "Do you need a minute?" she whispered. Regina shook her head with a faint smile. "I'm fine." She wasn't, of course, but she had a child to care for, a job to keep, a life to maintain. After her shift, Regina took Nala by the hand and stepped out into the early evening light. The breeze tugged gently at her hair as she walked toward the bus stop. She didn't drive, not because she couldn't, but because budgeting mattered when raising a child alone. Nala hopped beside her, humming a tune only toddlers could invent. Regina smiled down at her. This little girl was her pride, her joy, her purpose. People sometimes told Regina she was too strong for her own good, too proud, too determined to do everything herself. But what they didn't understand was that motherhood had rewired her heart. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about setting the kind of foundation she wished she'd had growing up, one built on stability and unconditional love. Nala didn't know the weight of the world Regina carried. She didn't know about long nights spent worrying. She didn't know about the marriage that cracked behind closed doors. She only knew Mommy, and Mommy always showed up. That alone was enough for Regina to keep moving. Across the city, Charles returned to his penthouse later that night, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Baltimore's skyline. The place was expensive, polished, modern, but painfully quiet. He loosened his tie, tossed it on the couch, and walked straight to the drink cabinet, only to close it again. He didn't need more fog in his mind. He needed clarity. He walked into his bedroom and stopped in front of the nightstand. There, behind a row of books, was a framed photo he rarely touched, but could never bring himself to throw away. He pulled it out gently. It was a picture of him holding baby Nala, tiny pink socks, small fingers gripping his shirt, her eyes barely open. Regina had taken the photo right after they brought Nala home from the hospital. Charles stared at it for a long time. He remembered everything about that moment, how small she felt in his arms, how terrified he was of breaking her, how Regina laughed at him, then leaned her head on his shoulder, how they whispered promises about the future, promises he didn't keep. He swallowed hard and set the picture on the bed beside him. His penthouse had awards on the shelves, trophies in glass cases, certificates framed neatly on the wall. But none of that filled the echo he felt inside. No amount of wealth could fix the gap he created. No luxury could replace the family he'd lost. No title could silence the truth ringing in his head. He had built an empire, but emptied his heart in the process. Later that evening, Charles sat at his dining table, head in his hands. His phone buzzed across the surface. He glanced at it. A message from Victor. "Need you to call me, man. Something feels off." Victor always knew when something was wrong. He wasn't the friend who asked shallow questions. He was the kind of friend who could read between the lines. Charles hesitated before hitting call. Victor picked up on the first ring. "You good?" Charles exhaled tightly. "No, I'm not." "What happened?" Charles didn't know how to explain it. He didn't know how to put the weight of the day into words. So he said the only thing he could manage: "I saw Regina." Victor didn't respond at first. When he finally spoke, his tone softened. "That explains why you sound like you got punched." "How bad was it?" Charles ran a hand through his hair. "She was holding a little girl. Her little girl." Victor paused again. His voice dropped. "You think—" "I know," Charles whispered. Victor didn't sugarcoat anything. He never had. "Charles, I told you months ago, you're trying to fill grief with routine. You're trying to replace something you didn't heal from. Elise isn't the issue. You are—" Charles closed his eyes. "I know. You can still fix this," Victor said gently. "But you have to be honest with yourself before you're honest with anything else." Charles ended the call and sat there in silence, hearing his friend's words echo in his head. Across town, Elise sat on her couch, staring at the wall, replaying the jewelry store moment over and over. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was trying to understand. She cared about Charles. She admired him. She respected his ambition. But she always felt something missing, something unspoken in the way he smiled, in the way he reached for her hand, in the way he avoided conversations about the past. Now she understood. He was with her, but he wasn't with her. He tried to love her, but love doesn't grow in borrowed space. She exhaled deeply, rubbing her temples, knowing the truth. Charles wasn't running toward her. He was running away from something else. Back in the penthouse, Charles returned to his bed and sat down slowly. He placed the photo of Nala in his lap, tracing her tiny hand with his thumb. A soft ache built in his chest. You ever sit alone in a quiet room and realize everything you pushed aside is waiting for you in the silence? That's where he was. That's who he was. The city lights flickered outside his window, but Charles didn't look up. He stayed there, holding the only photo that still mattered, feeling the weight of 3 years settle into his bones. His success couldn't warm him. His money couldn't comfort him. His plans couldn't silence him. He whispered into the empty room. I should have been there. His voice cracked, not loud, not dramatic, just human. He set the photo gently on the pillow beside him, like he was afraid it might break. Then he stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, unable to forget the sound of a little girl calling him daddy, because deep down he knew she wasn't wrong. She was his, and everything in his life was about to change. The door of Harbor Jewels slammed shut behind Charles, and the cold Baltimore air hit him like a burst of reality he didn't ask for. His breath fogged in the afternoon breeze, but he didn't feel the temperature. His chest was too tight. His mind was too loud. His heart was too shaken. He walked without direction, just moving because standing still hurt too much. His polished shoes clapped against the pavement as he crossed the walkway overlooking the harbor. Waves slapped softly against the wooden posts of the pier, but he barely heard them over the thudding inside his chest. He stopped near a metal railing, gripping it with both hands, knuckles whitening. His head bowed, his breathing uneven. If you're watching this, let me ask you something. Ever had life slap you with the truth you tried to bury? That was Charles in that moment. He wasn't a billionaire CEO. He wasn't a public figure. He wasn't Elise's fiancé. He was just a man facing the consequences of a past he abandoned. Behind him, the sound of heels striking pavement cut through the air. Charles, wait. Elise. He closed his eyes. Not because he didn't want to face her, but because he didn't know how to. She approached slowly, her voice tight. Please tell me what that was. He didn't answer. Who was she? Elise pressed, stepping beside him. Who was that woman holding the child? And why did that little girl look at you like she knew you? Charles still didn't look up. The pain in his chest didn't give him room to form words. Elise exhaled shakily. Are you going to tell me something, or am I supposed to figure it out myself? He finally spoke, barely. I didn't expect to see her. That's not an answer, Elise whispered. Charles swallowed. He opened his mouth again, but his voice cracked instead of forming a sentence. He was unraveling, not with drama but with quiet, unbearable truth. Elise studied him for a long moment. Was she someone important? Charles lifted his eyes, and the look on his face told her everything. Elise pressed her lips together, her shoulders stiffening. She stepped back. I see. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just broke a little. Their silence stretched until another voice joined the moment. Sir? Charles flinched at the sound. His assistant, Martin, jogged toward them, confusion etched across his face. I came as soon as I saw you leave. Are you all right? No, he wasn't. But the words wouldn't come. Martin glanced between him and Elise. Should I call the driver or reschedule your meeting? Charles shook his head. No meetings, not today. Martin nodded, waiting for instructions, but even he could sense the emotional earthquake still shaking his boss. Elise crossed her arms, her voice quieter now. I'm going back to the car. Take your time. She walked away slowly, leaving Charles and Martin alone on the pier. Martin approached with caution. You look pale. Do you want to sit? Charles forced a weak breath. I saw Regina. Martin blinked. Regina? Harper? Yes. Martin's eyebrows shot up. He knew the history. He wasn't just an assistant. He'd seen the aftermath of that marriage, even if he didn't know all the details. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked carefully. Charles shook his head once, unable to pull himself together long enough to speak. Martin didn't push. "I'll wait by the car. Take whatever time you need." He stepped away. Charles remained frozen, staring at the water, the city skyline, the weight of every choice he'd ever made pressing into his spine. Across the city, Regina carried Nala through the apartment door, her body tired but her mind racing. She set her purse down and exhaled quietly, leaning against the counter as she steadied herself. Nala tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy." Regina forced a soft smile. "Yes, baby. Why'd Daddy run away?" Regina's heart twisted. She knelt so she was eye level with her daughter. "Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups get surprised and they don't know what to do. Daddy didn't mean to scare you." Nala rested her forehead against Regina's. "He looked sad." Regina closed her eyes briefly. "Yes, baby, he did." They sat on the living room rug together, Regina stroking Nala's hair as the little girl hummed softly, unaware of how heavy the world really was. Evening fell. Baltimore's streetlights flickered on, one by one. Charles returned to his penthouse, but stepping inside didn't bring peace. It just highlighted the emptiness echoing through the rooms. He paced, sat down, stood up again, walked to the window, pressed a hand against the glass. Every part of him replayed the jewelry store moment, the look in Regina's eyes, the sound of Nala's voice. When night settled fully across the city, he gave up on trying to distract himself. He grabbed his phone. His thumb hovered over Regina's contact, a number he hadn't dialed in years. He felt foolish, nervous, unprepared, but he needed answers. He needed truth. He needed her voice. Finally, he typed the words that had been burning inside him since he fled the store. "Regina, I need to talk." He stared at the screen for a long second, then hit send, and just like that, the message traveled through the quiet Baltimore night, toward the woman he never stopped loving and the child he didn't know he still belonged to. Regina didn't sleep much that night. Even after washing dishes, folding laundry, and tucking Nala into bed, her mind circled the same questions over and over. Why had he shown up? Why now? Why did seeing him shake her in a way she thought she'd out when her phone buzzed at dawn? She wasn't surprised to see Charles's name. She stared at the message for a long time. "Regina, I need to talk." She sat on the edge of her bed, thumb hovering over the keyboard. She didn't owe him anything. Not after the years of silence. Not after raising Nala alone. Not after rebuilding herself piece by piece. But something inside her, something she didn't want to name, whispered that this conversation needed to happen. So she typed back a single word. "Okay." They agreed to meet at a small cafe near the harbor that afternoon, a place she chose intentionally. Neutral ground, public, safe. The harbor cafe was quiet when Regina arrived. Warm lights spilled from the wide windows, and the faint aroma of cinnamon pastries drifted through the air. She carried Nala on her hip, the child clutching a stuffed giraffe and blinking sleepily. Regina chose a table near the corner, one where she could see the entrance and the waterfront at the same time. She set Nala down, adjusting her daughter's jacket, smoothing the curls around her face. She didn't have long to wait. The door opened, and Charles stepped inside. He looked different, not physically. He still had the same clean haircut, tailored coat, polished shoes. But there was something behind his eyes now, a heaviness, a humility she had never seen on him before. He walked toward their table slowly, as if afraid to break something fragile. Regina straightened her posture, meeting his gaze with quiet strength. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she replied. It was simple, awkward, necessary. Charles pulled out the chair across from her. Nala looked up at him with wide eyes, recognizing him immediately. "Hi, Daddy." The word hit him hard. Not painfully, truthfully. He swallowed. "Hi, sweetheart." Nala giggled at the sound of his voice. Children are honest in ways adults forget how to be. Regina cleared her throat, gently. "Do you want something to drink?" Charles shook his head. "No, I just want to talk." Regina nodded. "Then talk." He took a breath, bracing himself. "Regina," he began, voice low and uneven. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about Nala." Regina studied him carefully. "You didn't ask." He flinched. "That's fair. But when you left and I left, everything was a mess. I thought you didn't want me involved." Her jaw tightened. You thought, Charles. You didn't ask. You didn't fight. You just disappeared. He bowed his head. I failed you, he admitted. Both of you. And I'm not making excuses. I was selfish. I was drowning in work, and I convinced myself that providing money meant I was being responsible. I pushed you away when you needed me most. I pushed our family away. He paused, breath shaky. And then yesterday, seeing her, hearing her say, Daddy, I realized how much I've missed, how much I threw away. Regina's hand tightened around her coffee cup. She didn't interrupt. She didn't comfort him. She had carried the weight of this truth alone for 3 years, and hearing him finally face it was both painful and relieving. He looked up at her. I want to know her. I want to know you again. I want another chance to do this right. Regina's eyes softened, but only slightly. Charles, this isn't about what you want. This is about what Nala needs, and what I need. He nodded. I'm ready to hear all of it. Whatever you want to tell me. So she told him. She began slowly, choosing every word with care. When we split, she said, I wasn't angry at first. I was heartbroken. I was hurt, but I wasn't angry. That came later, when you didn't call, when you didn't come back, when you didn't ask if I was okay. I kept waiting for you to realize we were still a family, even if we were struggling. She looked down at her hands. But you didn't come. Charles sucked in a slow breath. I found out I was pregnant right after you left, Regina continued. I planned to tell you. I rehearsed phone calls. I drafted messages I never sent. But every time I thought of contacting you, I remembered your last words. That. Maybe we should focus on separate paths. You walked away so easily, Charles. Too easily. And I didn't want Nala growing up with someone who saw her as an obligation. A tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it quickly before it could fall farther. I raised her alone not because I wanted to punish you, but because I didn't trust you to stay. Charles felt something inside him collapse. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't tell you because I didn't want her heart broken the way mine was, Regina said softly. I knew I could handle being alone. I didn't know if she could. Nala, unaware of the emotional heaviness, reached across the table and tapped Charles's hand. Juice? She asked sweetly. The tension cracked, just barely. Regina let out a breath that sounded like a forced laugh. She loves juice more than anything. Charles blinked away tears and smiled faintly. I'll get her one. He stood, walked to the counter, ordered a small apple juice, and returned to the table. When he set it in front of her, Nala squealed joyfully and clapped. Regina watched them both, uncertain, hopeful, terrified, relieved. This was the moment she had feared for 3 years. This was the moment she didn't know how to navigate. This was the moment she secretly prayed would be handled gently. Earlier that morning, before coming to the cafe, Charles had called Victor again. Victor hadn't sugarcoated anything. You messed up, but messing up doesn't mean you're finished, he said over the phone. Show up with honesty. Don't defend yourself. Don't deflect. Just listen. So that's what Charles did. He listened. Really listened. And for the first time in years, Regina felt heard. When Nala was busy scribbling on her napkin with a crayon Regina kept in her purse, Regina looked at Charles again, this time without the walls. Charles, she said quietly, we can try talking more. We can let you into Nala's life. But if we try again, it has to be different. He leaned forward, every part of him attentive. No more disappearing. No more work before family. No more choosing stress over communication. No more pretending everything is fine when it's not. Her voice wavered, but stayed strong. If we try again, it has to be equal. It has to be healthy. It has to be real. Charles nodded, breath shaking with relief. I want that. I'll earn it. Whatever it takes. Regina didn't smile. Not yet. Trust isn't rebuilt in an afternoon. But she didn't walk away either, and that, itself, was a beginning. Charles left the Harbor Cafe with a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Not confidence, not fear, not relief. It was something deeper. Something heavy. Something humbling. He walked toward the waterfront, the cool breeze brushing against his coat as he replayed Regina's voice in his mind. If we try again, it has to be different. For a man who'd built an entire empire with discipline and numbers, those words carried more weight than any contract he'd ever signed. The next morning, the sky over Baltimore was washed in gentle sunlight, soft and warm. Regina stood outside Nala's preschool, holding her daughter's hand. She had told Charles the night before that if he wanted to see Nala, he could meet them here, on time, present and focused. She didn't expect him to show. A part of her was prepared for disappointment, but then she heard footsteps behind her. Regina. She turned. Charles stood there, dressed down for the first time in her recent memory. No suit, no cufflinks, just simple jeans and a navy sweater. He looked like a father showing up for a child, not a CEO showing up for a meeting. Nala gasped. Daddy. She ran toward him with tiny, determined steps. Charles bent down quickly, catching her mid-run, lifting her into his arms as if he'd been doing it her whole life. He pressed his cheek to her curls, eyes closing for a second. Eyes, sweetheart, he whispered. Regina watched them quietly. She wasn't ready to forgive everything, but this sight softened something in her. Preschool starts in a few minutes, she said. I'd like to walk her in, he replied. She nodded. Together, the three of them walked inside. It was a small, colorful classroom filled with children's drawings taped to the walls and cubbies with tiny backpacks. Nala proudly pulled Charles by the hand to show him the star sticker she'd earned yesterday. You did that? He asked her gently. She nodded, grinning. He crouched beside her. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words, simple as they were, meant everything to the little girl who had waited her whole life to hear them. And to Regina, they meant he was trying. Later that afternoon, Regina agreed to let Charles join them at the National Aquarium, one of Nala's favorite places. It wasn't a planned outing. It wasn't structured or formal. It was just natural. When they arrived, Nala tugged both their hands, hopping excitedly. Fish, big fish. Mommy, Daddy, look. Regina blinked. She hadn't heard her daughter say Mommy and Daddy together in years. Charles noticed too. A faint tremble appeared in his exhale, but he didn't comment. They walked through the tunnel of shimmering blue, where sharks glided above them and schools of silver fish moved like shifting clouds. Nala pressed her palms to the glass, squealing every time something swam by. Daddy, look, he big, she said, pointing to a large stingray. Charles knelt beside her. Yeah, he is. See how he swims? Nice and smooth, like he's gliding. Nala mimicked the movement with her arms, laughing. Regina stood a few steps behind them, watching the interaction with a mix of admiration and quiet sorrow. She wasn't used to seeing Charles like this, gentle, present, unhurried. She whispered to herself, where was this years ago? But she caught her own judgment and released it with a small sigh. People change, sometimes too late, sometimes just in time. They made their way to the jellyfish exhibit, glowing softly in the dark room. Charles lifted Nala so she could see them up close. She rested her head against his shoulder, mesmerized. You like it? He asked. Yes, she murmured. Daddy, I want to come again. Charles's breath caught. We'll come as many times as you want, he promised. Regina heard it, and she knew he meant it. At lunchtime, they sat together at a small table overlooking the harbor. Regina ordered a salad, Charles a sandwich, and Nala insisted on chicken bites shaped like sea animals. As they waited for their food, Nala drew scribbles on napkins, occasionally showing her parents her art. This one is you, Mommy, she said proudly, pointing to a stick figure with squiggly hair. Regina smiled warmly. I look beautiful, baby. And this is Daddy, she added, pointing to another figure with giant circular eyes. Charles laughed. I looked terrified. Regina couldn't help laughing with him, a sound that felt both foreign and familiar. Then came the awkward moment. Nala held up a scribble with 3 figures holding hands. This one is us. Regina froze. Charles stopped breathing. They held the silence for a few seconds before Regina managed to say softly, That's very sweet, baby. Nala giggled, unaware of the impact. Charles cleared his throat, glancing at Regina as if seeking permission to hope for something more. Regina looked away, not rejecting him but not ready either. She was still learning how to let him in without losing herself again. While Charles spent the afternoon with Regina and Nala, Elise sat alone in her apartment, replaying the events at Harbor Jewels in her mind. She hadn't been angry at Regina. She wasn't angry at Charles for seeing a past love. She was angry at herself for ignoring the signs. When Charles returned home that evening, she was waiting in the living room. He froze when he saw her expression. Not harsh, not cold, just resigned. We need to talk, she said quietly. He nodded. I know. She gestured to the sofa. They sat. I've always admired you, Elise began. Your intelligence, your ambition, the way you chase goals so relentlessly. Charles didn't interrupt, but I think we both know your heart isn't fully here." He opened his mouth to speak, but she held up a hand gently. "It's okay, Charles. It really is. I don't want to force something that was never meant to work." A long silence stretched. He finally said, "I'm sorry." She gave a sad smile. "Don't be. Sometimes two people meet at the wrong time. We'll be fine, just not together." There were no accusations, no dramatic exit, just maturity. She packed her things over the next couple of days, and when she left, she hugged him lightly and whispered, "Go fix what matters." And he knew exactly what she meant. A few days later, Charles met Regina and Nala at a local park. Nala ran around the playground laughing while Charles stood beside Regina, hands in his pockets as if grounding himself. "You've been consistent," Regina admitted quietly. "I intend to stay that way," he replied. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a version of the man she fell in love with long ago, minus the arrogance, minus the distance. Just the man. Human. Humbled. Trying. "You're different," she whispered. "I had to lose everything before I realized what mattered," he said, "but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." She exhaled softly. Then, after a long pause, Charles turned to her with sincerity pouring from every word. "Regina, can I try to earn you back?" Her breath stilled. The question hung between them, fragile, hopeful, trembling with possibility. She didn't answer immediately. She didn't rush, but she didn't walk away. The park was quiet except for Nala's laughter echoing from the swings. Late afternoon sunlight washed through the branches overhead, warming the grass beneath Regina's feet. She stood perfectly still, trying to breathe through the weight of Charles's question. "Can I try to earn you back?" Those words floated between them like a fragile ribbon, delicate, trembling, uncertain. Regina didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. Her heart pulsed with old wounds and new possibilities, tangled together in a way that made her chest tighten. Charles didn't push. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly slumped, waiting with the patience she'd begged for years ago. And even though he wasn't saying another word, Regina could feel the sincerity pressing through the silence. "Have you ever tried again, even though your heart feared breaking twice?" That's where Regina was standing, right at the edge of hope and hesitation. She looked over to where Nala was kicking her legs joyfully on the swing. The child didn't understand the gravity of the moment. She didn't know her mother's heart was fighting a quiet battle. She only knew she wanted both of her parents close. Regina's breath softened. "We'll go slowly," she finally said. Charles lifted his eyes, almost startled. "Slowly is okay," he replied. "Whatever pace you need. I still have boundaries," she added, folding her arms slightly. "And this isn't a guarantee." "I know. And I'm doing this for Nala first. I understand." She nodded, not to him, but to herself. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise. It was permission. Permission for her own heart to take one cautious step forward. Nala waved from across the park. "Mommy, Daddy, push me." Regina couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. "She's calling you," she said softly. Charles breathed out, almost a laugh. "Let's go." They walked toward their daughter together, not holding hands, not touching, but aligned in a way they hadn't been in years. A few days later, Regina finished her shift at Harbor Jewels. The sky outside darkened into a deep navy as the store prepared to close. She was wiping the glass display when the bell above the door chimed softly. She turned, expecting a late customer, but it was Charles. He stepped inside, hands tucked into his coat pockets, offering her a quiet smile. "Need help closing up?" She blinked, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he replied. "But I want to." Regina hesitated, then motioned toward a second tray of jewelry. "Then, grab a cloth." He moved beside her at the counter, pulling the cloth gently across the glass. It was strangely intimate, not romantic, but familiar. They had once cooked dinners together, folded laundry together, fixed little things around their home together. Simple tasks used to be part of their life. Now this was their first shared task since their marriage crumbled. Regina's fingers brushed the edge of a necklace she'd arranged earlier. "You used to be terrible at cleaning glass," she said, her voice soft and teasing in a way she hadn't allowed in years. Charles chuckled. "Still am. But I'm better than I was. You're leaving streaks." He laughed under his breath. "Some things never change." She shook her head but couldn't hide the smile that curved across her face. It came naturally, surprising her with its ease. For a moment they stood shoulder to shoulder, the quiet hum of the store lights surrounding them. Regina wasn't sure what she felt: comfort, nostalgia, fear, hope, all layered together. Charles's voice dipped lower. "Regina, thank you for giving me even a little space." "I didn't say yes," she reminded him gently. "I know, but you didn't say no." She looked down at her cloth, heart thumping at the truth of that. When they finished closing the displays, Regina stepped toward the back to turn off the lights. Charles followed her, watching her carefully, respectfully. "You look lighter," he said softly. She paused. "Do the first?" "Yes," he whispered. "It's nice to see." Regina's breath caught for a moment, not because he complimented her, but because it felt genuine, uncalculated. She turned toward him, studying his expression. He wasn't the Charles who once rushed through life without noticing what mattered. He wasn't the man who brushed aside her needs. He wasn't the man who hid behind ambition. He was softer, and she could feel it. "Good night, Charles," she said quietly. But as she reached for the door, he spoke again. "Regina?" She looked over her shoulder. He didn't step closer. He simply let his voice carry what his body wouldn't push. "I'm proud of the life you built." Her chest tightened. In surprise, in gratitude, in ache. Nobody had said that to her since the divorce. Nobody had acknowledged how hard she fought to create stability for herself and for Nala. That sentence warmed her in a way she hadn't expected. She swallowed gently. "Good night," she repeated, softer this time. When she stepped outside into the cool night air, she found herself smiling, not out of romantic excitement, not out of longing, but out of genuine appreciation. For the first time since everything fell apart, Charles had spoken to her with the respect she always deserved. And that made her smile differently, the kind of smile that hints at possibility. Charles didn't move until Regina disappeared around the corner. Only then did he let out a breath he'd been holding since he entered the store. He stepped outside, hands still tucked in his pockets, feeling the cool wind press against his face. Have you ever felt something old begin to warm again, even though you swore you'd never reopen that door? That was Charles. He walked toward his car slowly, allowing the night to settle around him. In his chest, something unfamiliar stirred, cautious, hopeful, still bruised, but alive. And Regina, turning the corner toward her bus stop, touched her fingertips to her chin without realizing it. She was smiling, different from before, different from anything in the past 3 years. Different because it wasn't weighed down by resentment. It was the smile of someone who sees change and feels drawn toward it, even if she's scared. Later that night, Regina sat on the edge of her bed, brushing out her hair. Nala was already asleep, curled around her toy giraffe. She replayed the closing moments at the store, the shared silence, the steady teamwork, the way Charles looked at her, not with urgency, not with expectation, but with humility. And that sentence, "I'm proud of the life you built." She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that until the words settled deep in her chest. Regina closed her eyes and exhaled softly. She wasn't ready to fall back into his arms. She wasn't ready for promises. She wasn't ready for heartbreak. But she was ready for honesty, for slow steps, for a chance, cautious, measured, fragile, but a chance. She opened her eyes and smiled, not out of nostalgia, not out of longing, but out of genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, this time, things could grow the right way. And it was the first time she smiled at Charles that way in years. Over the next few weeks, Charles didn't just show up. He remained steady. Not grand, not overwhelming, not intrusive. Steady. And it was that consistency, not any dramatic gesture, that began to unwind the tight knot Regina kept around her heart. He walked Nala into preschool twice a week. He called in the evenings just to say goodnight to her. He helped Regina with groceries when she needed it, and stepped back when she didn't. Regina noticed every effort, even the subtle ones he wasn't trying to highlight. She noticed the way he listened more than he spoke now, the way he knelt to tie Nala's shoe without being asked, the way he carried tension in his shoulders whenever he worried she might be getting tired. Little things that once went unseen between them now held meaning. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. Baltimore began to witness them again, not as a broken couple trying to patch up something brittle, but as two people learning how to fit into each other's worlds with care and intention. One Saturday morning, Regina agreed to meet Charles and Nala downtown for a family day. She arrived at the Inner Harbor wearing a denim jacket, her curls loose, and a quiet smile she tried to keep from growing too wide. Nala spotted her immediately. "Mommy." She ran toward Regina with her arms wide, and Regina scooped her up with a playful spin. Charles stood beside them, hands in his pockets, admiring the moment with a softness he wasn't hiding. "I got her a balloon," he said. "She picked pink." Regina nodded. Of course she did. They started walking along the waterfront, the breeze brushing warm across their faces. Nala held their hands tightly, one little hand in Regina's, one in Charles's, swinging between them with excited little hops. People passing by smiled at the sight, not because they looked perfect, but because they looked happy. Charles glanced at Regina. "I forgot how much she loves being outside." "She gets it from my side," Regina teased. "You were always glued to your laptop." "That's fair," he admitted with a sheepish grin. They made their way to a vendor cart selling warm pretzels. Charles ordered 3, one for each of them, and Regina blinked in surprise when he handed her one. "You used to take the soft middle part and leave me the crispy edges," she said. "I remember." His voice dipped lower. "I remember a lot more than you think." Regina's heart gave a small, unsteady flutter. She didn't respond, but she didn't shut down either. She took a bite of the pretzel, savoring the warmth. Nala smudged salt across her cheeks, trying to eat hers. They both laughed. It was messy. It was simple. It was exactly the kind of moment that makes a family feel like home. Later in the afternoon, they stopped at a small park by the harbor. Regina sat on a bench while Charles knelt to help Nala climb a miniature rock wall. "Hold here," he instructed gently, guiding her hand. Nala giggled, pressing one foot onto the next step. "And here," he added. "You're really good at this," Regina said from the bench. He looked over his shoulder. "I watched a video on how to help kids climb safely." He shrugged. "Wanted to get it right." She felt something soften again. As Nala climbed, Regina observed quietly. The patience in Charles's voice, the protective way he hovered, without smothering the genuine pride glowing in his eyes. This wasn't the man who used to rush out the door. This wasn't the man who forgot dinner or left her alone on weekends. This was someone trying, really trying, to learn how to be a father. When Nala reached the top, she threw her arms up triumphantly. "I did it." Charles clapped with an enthusiasm that pulled laughter out of Regina. "Yes, you did. That's my girl." Nala beamed at both of them, her joy contagious. In that moment, Regina felt a full-body warmth she hadn't allowed herself in years. That evening, Regina invited Charles and Nala back to her apartment for dinner. It wasn't planned, but as they walked toward the bus stop, she found herself saying, "I made stew this morning. There's enough for everyone." Charles blinked with quiet surprise. "I'd like that." Inside, her apartment felt lived in and warm. Children's artwork taped to the fridge, soft blankets folded on the couch, a hint of lavender in the air. Charles helped set the table, while Regina heated the food. Nala ran around with her toy giraffe, making both adults laugh each time she declared the giraffe was hungry too. As they ate, Regina watched Charles try each dish with unfamiliar interest. "This is really good," he said. "It's just comfort food," she replied, slightly flustered. "That's exactly why I like it." There was no flirtation in his tone, just appreciation, genuine, unfiltered appreciation. It eased her nerves more than any apology ever could. After dinner, Nala curled up beside Charles on the couch to watch a cartoon. Regina leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, observing the scene. He didn't check his phone once. He didn't rush the moment. He didn't break the connection. He simply existed with his daughter, present in a way she wondered if he'd ever been capable of before. Her chest tightened, not from pain, but from recognition. She was rediscovering something she once adored about him, his softness, his tenderness, his heart. A week later, Regina invited Charles to a community cookout hosted near Patterson Park. She didn't intend for it to be a test, but part of her wanted to see if he could handle the lively, family-centered environment that defined her world. When they arrived, music drifted in the air, grills smoked gently, and people laughed as kids raced around with footballs. Regina's friends waved her over immediately. "Girl, who is that handsome man behind you?" One teased. Regina flushed. "Just Charles. Just..." Another friend echoed with a knowing smirk. Charles approached respectfully, greeting her friends with a warmth that surprised Regina. He didn't act out of place or uncomfortable. He observed, listened, adapted. When one of Regina's uncles insisted he join the domino table, Charles accepted with a humble grin. Regina watched from a distance as he carefully followed the rules, laughing when the older men teased him for losing. It wasn't about winning. It was about showing up in her world with humility instead of ego. Later, music turned into a soulful groove. Some people coaxed Regina out to dance. She shook her head at first, but eventually joined, moving gently in rhythm. When she glanced over at Charles, she caught him watching her, not lustfully, not possessively, but with admiration. And something deeper. A quiet kind of love. If you believe families can heal, drop a heart emoji in the comments. Your support helps stories like this reach more amazing people. As the evening wound down and Nala slept on Regina's shoulder, Charles offered to walk them to their car. They moved slowly beneath the warm streetlights, the soft glow casting gentle shadows along the sidewalk. "Regina?" he said quietly. She looked at him. He inhaled deeply, the kind of breath someone takes when they've carried words too heavy to voice easily. "I never stopped loving you." The words landed softly, but powerfully. Regina froze. Her heart clenched, not from fear, but from the emotional truth she had been avoiding. Charles didn't step closer. He didn't repeat himself. He just let the confession settle between them, honest and unforced. Regina swallowed. She didn't respond. She wasn't ready. But she didn't walk away. And that silence was not rejection. It was consideration. Regina didn't sleep well that night. After Charles walked her and Nala to the car, after he whispered those words that rattled every protective wall she had built, Regina sat awake long after she tucked her daughter in. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft breathing of her little girl in the next room. Regina sat at the kitchen table, elbows propped on the wooden surface, fingers lightly pressed against her temple. "I never stopped loving you." It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It wasn't said with expectation. It was said with truth. And truth has a way of slipping under defenses, even well-constructed ones. Regina wasn't afraid of Charles. She wasn't afraid of love. She was afraid of the possibility of losing herself again, afraid of history repeating, afraid of pain returning, afraid of trusting too fast, afraid of trusting at all. But there was something else inside her too, something she didn't want to name, but couldn't deny. Hope. The next morning, Regina stood at the bathroom mirror brushing out her curls, her reflection revealing more than she wanted to admit. Her eyes were softer than usual, her posture less guarded, her breath more thoughtful. When she stepped into the living room, Nala was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug as she made a tower of blocks. "Mommy," she said without looking up. "Daddy coming today?" Regina's heart tightened. "I don't know, baby." Nala placed a block carefully on the tower. "I like when Daddy come." Regina swallowed. "I know you do. Children don't calculate emotional stakes. They don't wonder what could go wrong. They don't analyze the past. They follow joy. They follow love. They follow who makes them feel safe." And for the first time, Regina realized how deeply Nala wanted both her parents in her life. Not separately, not in rotation, but together. But together meant vulnerability. Together meant trust. Together meant risk. A risk she wasn't sure she was ready for. Across the city, Charles stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse bathroom, fixing his collar before heading out to meet Regina and Nala. But today, he hesitated. He stared at himself, at the man who built billion-dollar deals, ran meetings with confidence, and traveled the world without blinking. Yet now, his hands trembled slightly. Why? Because he finally understood what was at stake. Not a relationship, not a reunion. Not a second chance at marriage, a family. He feared repeating the worst version of himself, absent, distracted, emotionally distant. He feared failing Regina again. He feared disappointing Nala before he even earned her trust. He whispered into the mirror, "Don't mess this up." Not in a harsh way, in a human way. He grabbed his coat and headed toward the door. He wasn't confident. He wasn't steady. He wasn't ready. But he was willing. And sometimes, willingness is the beginning of healing. Regina agreed to meet Charles at a local playground that afternoon. The sun was warm, and the trees around the park rustled softly in the breeze. Nala ran toward the slides while Regina and Charles sat on a bench nearby. Charles watched Nala's every move with careful attention. Regina noticed. "You're being extra cautious today," she said gently. He shook his head. "I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss anything." Regina's eyes softened. "She's not going anywhere. She went 3 years without knowing me. he whispered. That's already too long. Regina's breath caught. He didn't say it with guilt. He said it with responsibility. Nala ran back to them and climbed directly onto Charles's lap, his arms wrapped around her instinctively. Daddy, look! She pointed toward the climbing ropes. I can do it now. Charles smiled. Then go show me. She ran off again, determined and fearless. Regina watched them both, her daughter's effortless trust and Charles's cautious joy. It tugged at her heart in two different directions. One direction whispered, "This is what she deserves." The other whispered, "Be careful, Regina." Her fear wasn't his fault, but it was real, and it lived inside her like an old bruise that still aches when pressed. That evening, Charles stopped by Victor's apartment, the same place where they'd shared laughs during college, where late-night pizza boxes piled up on the counter, where life had once been uncomplicated. Victor opened the door with a knowing smirk. "You look like a man with too many thoughts." Charles dropped onto the couch. I told her. I told Regina I never stopped loving her. Victor raised an eyebrow. And I don't know what happens next. Victor leaned back in his chair. You're expecting too much too fast. She's not a business deal you can close. Charles nodded silently. You hurt her, Victor continued, but you didn't destroy her. She rebuilt herself. That means if she lets you in again, it's not because she needs you, it's because she chooses you. Charles swallowed. That's what scares me. Victor smiled gently. Charles, being afraid doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means what you're doing matters. Charles looked down at his hands. I don't want to fail them. Then don't rush. Let Regina lead the pace. Let Nala guide your bond. Just show up every day. Charles nodded again, breathing deeply. Victor added softly, Love is not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be honest. Charles lifted his gaze. Thank you. Victor smirked. You're welcome. Now don't go messing this up with some grand gesture you're not ready for. Charles chuckled. I won't. But inside, he knew Victor was right. Patience was the key. And patience was the test. 3 days later, Regina and Charles met again, this time at her apartment to pick up something Nala forgot at the park. They stood in the living room as Nala colored on the floor with her crayons. Evening light poured through the window, painting warm shapes across the walls. For a moment, everything felt easy. Too easy. Regina handed Charles the small toy car Nala left behind. Their fingers brushed lightly. Charles didn't pull away. Regina didn't move either. The air thickened, not heavy, not tense, but alive with something fragile and unspoken. He looked at her with quiet hope. She looked at him with quiet fear. Regina, he whispered. Her breath faltered. He leaned in slowly, not forcefully, not fast, not demanding, just gently, as if asking permission without words. Her heart thudded. Her eyes softened. Her body froze. And at the last second, she turned her head away. Not sharply, not angrily, but with a tenderness that still held boundaries. Charles stopped immediately, stepping back with understanding instead of frustration. Regina closed her eyes, inhaling shakily. I'm not ready, she whispered. Charles nodded, voice low. I know. She looked at him again, eyes shimmering with the weight of everything she wasn't saying. But I'm trying, she added softly. He smiled, not disappointed, not defeated, but grateful. I'm here, he whispered, and for the first time, both of them felt it clearly. Love was returning, but fear walked beside it, and the journey forward would require both of them to navigate that tension, slowly, carefully, honestly. The cliffhanger wasn't a kiss denied. It was a heart opening, just not all the way, not yet. The next morning, the air in Regina's apartment felt heavier than usual. She stood by the kitchen counter pouring cereal for Nala, but her mind wasn't on breakfast. Her thoughts kept slipping back to last night, the almost kiss, the gentleness in Charles's eyes, and the way she had turned away at the last second. She hadn't slept properly. She kept hearing her own voice in her head. I'm not ready. She meant it. But it didn't stop the guilt from rising in her chest. Across the city, Charles was pacing in his living room, replaying the moment too. Not with anger, not even disappointment, but confusion. He wanted to understand what she felt, what she feared, what he had triggered. But Regina wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. And misunderstandings have a way of finding their moment. Later that afternoon, Charles stopped by to pick up Nala for a short outing. Regina opened the door slowly, her posture a little stiff, her tone controlled. "Hey," he greeted softly. "Hi," she replied, forcing a small smile. Nala ran toward him. "Daddy." He picked her up with a warmth that eased the room slightly. "Ready to go get ice cream?" "Yes." Regina handed him a small backpack for Nala. Their eyes met, brief, cautious, uncertain. Charles hesitated. "Are you okay? I felt like I made you uncomfortable yesterday. I didn't mean to." Regina's breath hitched, but she masked it quickly. "You didn't make me uncomfortable. I just needed space." "Okay," he said gently. "I just didn't want to cross a line." "You didn't," she said again, sounding firmer this time. But her tone carried more weight than she realized. Tension she wasn't trying to express but couldn't hide. Charles picked up on it instantly. "Regina," he said softly, "if something is bothering you, you can tell me." "There's nothing bothering me," she cut in too quickly. He blinked, taken aback. "Okay." She exhaled sharply, rubbing her forehead. "I'm just tired, Charles." The conversation should have ended there, but emotions from yesterday lingered just beneath the surface, ready to push through the smallest crack. And that crack arrived the moment Charles said, "I just want to make sure I'm not repeating old mistakes." Regina froze. Old mistakes. Those words hit like a spark touching dry leaves. Her chest tightened, something unhealed rising too fast. "Old mistakes?" she whispered. He nodded carefully. "I don't want to hurt you again. So if I did something wrong yesterday, tell me. I don't want miscommunication between us." Her eyebrows pulled together, a flicker of frustration breaking through. "You didn't do anything wrong yesterday," she said again. "It's everything before yesterday that—" She stopped herself, but it was too late. Charles felt his stomach drop. "Regina, what do you mean?" She looked away, swallowing hard. "I don't want to have this conversation right now." "Maybe we should," he said quietly, gently but firmly, "because I feel like there's something you're carrying that I haven't addressed." She let out a strained breath. "Charles, you don't want to dig into this." "I do," he insisted. "Why?" She snapped before she could stop herself. "So you can apologize again? So you can promise again? So you can pretend you didn't leave us behind?" Her voice trembled. She didn't raise it, but the wound underneath was unmistakable. Charles felt his chest constrict. "Regina, that's not fair. No." Her eyes glistened, anger mixing with hurt. "You say you've changed, but do you even know what you left me with? Do you have any idea what it felt like to raise a child alone because you were too busy choosing everything else except us?" Charles stepped back slightly, absorbing each word like a blow. "I didn't know. You didn't ask." She fired back. "You didn't call. You didn't check on us. You didn't fight for us. You let the silence become your answer." Her voice broke on the last sentence, and suddenly Charles understood. This wasn't about yesterday. This wasn't about the kiss. This was about years of swallowed pain finally reaching the surface. "Regina," he whispered, guilt choking him. But she wasn't finished. "You show up now," she continued, voice trembling. "You say the right things. You act patient. You look at me like you're ready to try again. But do you know what that does to me? It scares me. It makes me feel like I'm standing at the edge of something that hurt me once already." Her fingers curled into her palms. "I can't afford to fall again if you're going to disappear." The room stilled. Even Nala, oblivious to the weight between them, sat quietly on the floor with her coloring book. Charles opened his mouth to speak, but the words lodged in his throat. Regina blinked quickly, wiping at her cheeks before tears fully formed. "I need air," she whispered. "Regina, wait." He stepped forward. "Don't," she said, stepping back, shaking her head. "I can't do this conversation right now. I can't." The trembling breath she took afterward said more than her words could. She grabbed her coat from the hook, opened the door, and stepped outside. Before Charles could follow, she turned around with one last soft, trembling sentence. I don't know if love can survive a wound like this." The door closed gently but painfully behind her. "Do you think love can survive a wound like this? Tell me in the comments, because some hearts need more than time to heal." Charles stood in the quiet apartment, hands trembling. He didn't chase her, not because he didn't care, but because he finally understood that chasing wasn't what she needed. She needed to breathe. She needed to face old hurt without being pushed. She needed space to process what resurfaced. Nala looked up at him with big, innocent eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. Charles knelt beside her, voice low and shaken. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured, pulling her gently into his arms. "Mommy just needs a moment." But as he held Nala, his heart twisted painfully, because for the first time since they reunited, he realized just how deep his past choices had cut, and how long the road to healing might truly be. Regina didn't walk far. She stepped outside into the cool evening air and crossed the street, sitting on a bench near a patch of fading grass. Her breath trembled, and she pressed her palms against her knees, trying to steady herself. She wasn't crying because of Charles. Not entirely. She was crying because of everything she carried inside herself, everything she had kept silent, hidden, buried, neatly folded behind years of strength. When the tears finally fell, they didn't come in loud bursts. They came quietly, heavy, tired, necessary. Inside the apartment, Charles hesitated at the door, unsure if following her would help or harm. He wanted to run after her, hold her, apologize for every mistake he had ever made. But he remembered something Victor once told him. Sometimes presence means giving space, not stepping in. So he waited. Nala sat on the rug, humming softly to herself, unaware of the emotional weight around her. She moved her crayons gently, drawing a small stick figure family, Mommy, Daddy, Nala, all holding hands. When Charles glanced at the drawing, his breath caught. That picture wasn't just art. It was longing. It was hope. It was innocence trying to bridge a broken foundation. After several long minutes, Charles couldn't stand the silence anymore. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. He didn't chase Regina down the street. He simply walked until he found her sitting on the bench, arms crossed, chin trembling. She didn't look at him right away. He lowered himself onto the far end of the bench, giving her enough distance to breathe, but close enough to show he wasn't leaving. For a moment, they sat in silence, two people with years of history between them, sitting like strangers who still knew too much about each other's hearts. Finally, Regina whispered, "You weren't supposed to see me like this." Charles shook his head softly. "Regina, you don't have to hide from me." "Yes, I do." Her voice cracked. "Because once I let you see me, you disappear." He closed his eyes as guilt twisted inside him. "I'm not disappearing this time," he said quietly. "You don't know that," she replied. He turned toward her, pain etched across his face. "Regina, I'm trying. I'm really trying. I know I failed you before, but I'm here now. Just tell me what scared you so much today. I want to understand." She finally looked at him, eyes red, lashes damp. The next words came out trembling. "I wasn't afraid of the kiss. I was afraid of what comes after it." Charles froze. Regina wiped her cheek with her sleeve, her voice barely above a whisper. "My secret fear, the one I haven't told you, is that you'll choose ambition over family again, that you'll walk right back into your world and forget you promised to stay." Her lips trembled as she spoke. "I can't let Nala go through the same abandonment I did. I can't watch you pick business trips over bedtime stories. I can't sit alone in a house waiting for a man who won't come home. I survived that once, but she shouldn't have to." Charles felt something break inside him, not pride, not ego, something deeper. He didn't move toward her. He didn't reach for her hand. He allowed her fear to exist. He allowed her pain to speak. "Regina," he whispered, voice thick, "you think I would walk away from her again?" Her answer was slow, honest, and devastating. "I don't know anymore." The uncertainty in her voice hurt more than any accusation. It was the voice of someone who had once believed in him completely, and learned the hard way not to. Charles leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. "I can accept your anger," he said softly, "but I can't accept being someone you fear. Not anymore. Not again." Her breath quivered. "You were my husband, Charles," she whispered. "My partner, my heart. And I watched you pick everything except us. Do you know how hard it was not to hate you? To raise our daughter alone and pretend it didn't break something inside me?" Charles's eyes filled. "Yes," he murmured. "I hurt you, more than I let myself believe. And I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove to you that I'm not that man anymore." She shook her head weakly. "And how do I know this isn't temporary?" Charles swallowed hard. "You don't," he admitted. "All you have is my actions, and I know that's not enough yet, but I'll show you, every day, every moment. I'll be the man I should have been." Regina closed her eyes, tears sliding down again. Not angry tears this time, but exhausted ones. tears that came from trying to be strong for too long. Silence settled between them again. And then, a small, innocent voice broke it. "Mommy." They both turned. Nala toddled toward them from the apartment door, holding her drawing, the stick figure family with hands connected. She stood in front of Regina and gently placed the paper in her lap. "Mommy sad?" she whispered. Regina choked back another sob. "Just a little, baby." Nala climbed onto her lap and pressed her small hand against Regina's cheek, wiping a tear like she'd seen her mom do countless times for her. "Daddy here," Nala said simply. "Daddy no go." Charles felt his heart crack wide open. Regina looked down at her daughter, the innocence, the hope, the trust, and something inside her loosened, softened, surrendered. She looked back at Charles with quiet vulnerability. For the first time in years, she let the walls fall just enough for him to truly see her. Charles whispered, voice breaking, "I'm so sorry, Regina. I'm sorry for everything you carried alone. I'm sorry for not being the man you needed. I'm sorry for leaving you with all the weight. I'm sorry for hurting you and our daughter. I should have stayed. I should have chosen you both." A tear finally slipped down his cheek, the first he had allowed himself to shed in years. Regina watched him. She didn't interrupt. She didn't push him away. She didn't hide. She reached out with hesitant fingers and touched his hand gently. A fragile gesture, but real. For the first time, she let him hold her. Her body trembled as she leaned into him, burying her face in his shoulder, her tears quiet but uncontrollable. He wrapped his arms around her, carefully, respectfully, without expectation, and for the first time since their marriage fell apart, they cried together, not from anger, not from regret, but from the possibility of healing. What would you forgive for the sake of your family? Tell us in the comments. Your voice helps stories like this reach others who need strength. Regina didn't know how long she stayed in Charles's arms. Minutes, maybe longer. Time softened when pain was finally allowed to breathe. The bench beneath them was cold, the streetlights glowing softly overhead, and the city hummed at a gentle distance. But none of that mattered. For the first time in years, Regina let herself lean into someone instead of standing alone against the world. Charles didn't rush her. He didn't whisper promises. He didn't try to fix anything. He simply held her the way she needed to be held, quietly, steadily, without the slightest hint of letting go too soon. When Regina finally pulled back, her eyes were wet, but her expression held something new. Not surrender, not acceptance, but possibility. A space where healing could begin. Charles kept his voice low. "You don't have to decide anything today." "I know," she whispered. "And you don't owe me forgiveness in one moment." "I know that too." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I'm just tired, Charles. Tired of doing everything alone. Tired of hoping without knowing if I can trust that hope." He nodded slowly. "Then let me earn it." Not with words, with consistency. She held his gaze, searching for the truth beneath his tone. And she found it. Not perfection, not certainty, but genuine effort. For Regina, that mattered more. The next day, Regina woke earlier than usual. For once, the weight on her chest felt a little lighter. Not gone, just lighter. She walked into the kitchen to make breakfast. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the floor. Nala toddled in a minute later, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy," she mumbled sleepily. "Daddy come today?" Regina hesitated. Yesterday, that question had hit her like a wound reopening. But today it landed differently. "I don't know yet, baby," she said gently. "But we'll see." Nala nodded and climbed into her chair, swinging her legs as she waited for her cereal. A small smile tugged at Regina's lips. Children have a way of simplifying what adults spend years complicating. For Nala, family wasn't a theory, a fear, or a past mistake. It was love. It was presence. It was two people who cared about her. And deep down, Regina knew that mattered more than anything. Meanwhile, across the city, Charles stood in his office surrounded by windows overlooking downtown Baltimore. His assistant had left a stack of files on his desk, each marked urgent. He didn't touch them. He pulled out his phone instead and typed a message. "Good morning. I hope you and Nala slept well. I'm around today if either of you needs anything, but only if you're comfortable. No pressure." He didn't send anything else. No demands. No expectations. Just presence. Minutes later, when he pushed the files aside, he realized something profound. For the first time in his adult life, A business crisis didn't feel like the end of the world. But losing Regina and Nala again? That would be. Later that afternoon, Regina took Nala to a small park near the community center. Children played on the swings while parents chatted nearby. The air felt warm and genuine, the kind of environment that always reminded Regina who she was. As she watched Nala run toward the slide, her phone buzzed. A message from Charles. "How is she doing today? How are you doing?" Regina took a slow breath. She typed back, "We're okay. Thank you for checking." He didn't respond immediately, which she appreciated. She needed space, and he was giving it. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. "Would Nala like to go to the aquarium tomorrow? Only if you come too. No pressure. Just time together. All three of us." Regina stared at the screen. A month ago, she would have shut this down. Last week, she would have hesitated. Yesterday, she would have panicked. But today she felt steady enough to say, "We'll let you know." It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. It was a door gently left open. That evening, Charles invited Victor over. The two friends sat on the balcony overlooking the harbor, the city lights reflecting in the water. Victor took a sip of his drink and leaned back. "So, how are things going with Regina?" Charles let out a long breath. "She cried today. In my arms." Victor blinked. "That good or bad?" "A little of both," Charles said honestly. "She told me what she's really afraid of, that I'll pick ambition over family again." Victor nodded slowly. "She's not wrong to fear that." Charles swallowed. "I know. I hate that it's true." Victor leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You can't erase the past, but you can build a different future. Showing up for her and Nala isn't some heroic gesture. It's what you should have been doing all along." Charles nodded, absorbing every word. "You want my advice?" Victor continued. "Always be steady and be patient. She's not looking for the old version of you. She's watching to see if the new one can last." Charles closed his eyes, letting the weight and the hope settle in equal measure. "I'm not giving up," he said quietly. Victor smirked. "Good, because women like Regina don't come twice." The next day, Regina agreed to meet Charles at the aquarium, not because she was ready for romance, not because last night changed everything, but because healing isn't about sudden leaps. It's about small, steady steps. They walked through the building together, Nala between them, pressing her face against the glass as colorful fish swam by. At one point, Nala grabbed both their hands again, linking them without ceremony. Regina stiffened for a second, but Charles didn't tighten his grip. He let her decide whether to hold on or pull away. She didn't pull away. They watched sharks glide through the deep tanks. They laughed when Nala squealed at the giant stingrays. They stood close enough for warmth, far enough for comfort. At one exhibit, Regina turned to Charles unexpectedly. "Thank you for being gentle today." He met her eyes, soft and sincere. "Thank you for letting me be here. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was real, and that made it powerful." Later that week, Charles found himself standing outside Harbor Jewels after closing time. Not to recreate old mistakes, but to create something new. He peered into the window, imagining Regina inside the store where everything began, where he froze, where his world stopped, where his heart woke up again. He smiled softly. It wasn't time yet. He knew that. But he was planning something, not rushed, not extravagant, not overwhelming. Something thoughtful, something symbolic, something rooted in growth, not guilt. Victor's words echoed in his mind. Be steady, be patient. He stepped away from the window with renewed purpose. Slowly, quietly, intentionally, Charles Bennett began preparing something that would honor Regina's pace, not override it. Something that whispered, "I'm here. For real this time." Harbor Jewels looked different to Charles this time. The glass windows reflected the late morning light, and for the first time since that shocking day when he froze at the doorway, he walked toward the entrance with a steady heart. Not confident, not fearless, but intentional. He wasn't here to run from the past. He wasn't here to repeat mistakes. He wasn't here to create chaos. He was here to build something. Inside, Regina stood behind the counter, arranging new pieces on display. The soft overhead lights gave her skin a warm glow, and her curls were pulled back loosely today, a few strands falling gently along her cheeks. She looked peaceful. She looked grounded. She looked like home. When she lifted her head and saw Charles walking toward her, her breath caught, but she didn't tense this time. Her shoulders softened, her lips parted slightly in surprised warmth. He smiled gently. "Hey, hi," she murmured, trying but failing to hide the small smile tugging at her lips. "You're early." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "I needed a little time before the store got busy." There was something in his tone, something deliberate, steady, and full of purpose that made her heartbeat quicken. "Charles, is everything okay?" He nodded once. "Everything's better than okay. I just needed to bring you something." Regina blinked. "Bring me something?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not the same type of box that once sent her heart into panic. Not the symbolic weight of old promises, but something slender. Softer. Deeply thoughtful. Regina felt her breath curl in her chest. He placed the box on the counter with gentle care, his voice low. "This isn't about the past," he said softly. "And it's not about rushing the future. It's about acknowledging who we are right now and what we're rebuilding." She stared at the box, unsure if she was ready to open it. Charles noticed her hesitation and didn't push. Instead, he spoke the words he'd been repeating to himself for days. "You set the pace. You choose the steps. I'm just here, showing up the way I should have shown up years ago." Her eyes glistened, and he nodded toward the box. "Can you open it? Please?" Regina swallowed, fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside was a locket, sterling silver, polished softly, shaped like a teardrop. It wasn't extravagant, not flashy, not designed to overwhelm her. It was meaningful. When she opened it gently, she gasped. On one side, a tiny picture of her, Charles, and Nala at the aquarium, Nala laughing, Regina smiling shyly, Charles trying not to look overwhelmed. On the other side, a simple engraving. "Forward, together." Regina's hand flew to her mouth. Charles exhaled shakily. "I didn't choose diamonds. I didn't choose gold. I didn't choose anything that felt like pressure. I wanted something that represents what we're doing now. Not starting over like the past didn't happen, but moving forward with honesty." Regina blinked through the sudden warmth filling her chest. "Charles." He stepped closer, just close enough for his voice to reach her steadily. "I didn't buy this to ask you for anything. Not commitment, not answers, not promises. I just wanted you to have something that reflects what we're slowly rebuilding. Something you can hold on days when doubt creeps in, and something I hope one day symbolizes the family we're choosing to become." He paused, that familiar tightness in his throat returning as he studied her expression. "You don't owe me forgiveness overnight. You don't owe me trust immediately. But you deserve to know that every step I take now is toward you and Nala, not away." Regina's vision blurred. Her fingers brushed over the locket as though afraid it might disappear. She lifted it gently, letting the silver rest against her palm. It was warm already, just from her touch. "Charles," she whispered, voice trembling. "This is beautiful." His eyes softened. "I'm glad you think so." She closed the locket slowly, her breath unsteady as she looked at him. "You remembered that picture?" "Of course I did," he murmured. "It was the first time I felt like we were a family again. Even if you didn't say anything, I felt it." Regina's heart squeezed. That day, she had felt it too. He continued, lowering his voice. "I'm not asking you for perfection. I just want the chance to do it right this time, to be the man you and Nala deserve, to build real memories, not ones filled with regret." Regina set the box down gently, her fingers trembling as she touched the locket again. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Charles said softly. "Feeling it is enough." Her breath hitched as tears began to gather in her eyes. "You make it hard to hold my guard up," she whispered. He gave a small, hopeful smile. "Then maybe your guard is tired, and maybe you don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Her lips parted. She looked at the locket, then back at him, and something inside her, something fragile, wounded, yet resilient, melted. His voice dipped lower. "Regina, you matter to me, not as a memory, not as an obligation, not as an old chapter, but as the woman I love, as the mother of our daughter, as someone whose strength I respect deeply." Her breath trembled. He stepped closer, still giving her enough space, but close enough for her to feel the sincerity radiating from him. "You don't have to say it back," he whispered. Regina shook her head slowly, and then she whispered the words she had buried for 3 silent, aching years. I love you. Charles froze, not with shock, but with a kind of relief so deep it shook him. Regina wiped her cheek, her voice breaking softly. I love you, Charles. I never really stopped. I just didn't think it was safe to say it again. He exhaled, shakily, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms too quickly. You don't have to be afraid with me anymore, he said gently. Regina looked at the locket again, holding it to her chest as if embracing a piece of her own healing. And in that moment, it wasn't just a necklace. It was a beginning, a choice, a fragile, beautiful step into the future. Narrator softly to the viewer. Isn't it beautiful when life gives you a second chance? Regina took one slow breath, stepped closer, and rested her forehead against Charles's chest. The world outside moved on. Customers passed. Cars honked faintly. Baltimore hummed in its everyday rhythm. But in that moment, a family began again. For the next few days, the world around Regina felt different. Not because everything was perfect now, far from it, but because something inside her had finally unlocked. She had spoken the 3 words she had buried under years of fear. I love you. And for the first time since their marriage unraveled, Regina didn't feel guilty for loving him. She didn't feel foolish. She didn't feel weak. She felt honest. And honesty has a way of softening even the deepest wounds. On Saturday morning, the 3 of them met at the farmer's market near Fells Point. It wasn't planned to be special. It wasn't meant to be romantic. It was simply an invitation from Charles. Can I spend the morning with you both? It was the gentlest way he could ask to be part of their life. Regina agreed. And now, as they strolled through the market, Nala sat on Charles's shoulders holding a tiny bouquet of flowers a vendor had handed her. Regina walked beside them, occasionally glancing up with a smile she no longer tried to hide. At one booth, Regina paused to look at handmade jewelry, stone bracelets, delicate necklaces, beaded earrings. Her eyes lingered a little longer than usual. Charles noticed immediately. You like those? He asked. Regina nodded softly. I love handcrafted pieces. They have personality. He looked at her thoughtfully. You should be selling your own pieces here. She laughed lightly. Charles, I haven't designed anything in years. That doesn't mean you can't start again. She stilled, his words sinking deeper than he intended. You really think I could? He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I think you have more talent than you ever gave yourself credit for, and you gave up your dream because life got heavy. But life isn't heavy like that anymore. Not if I can help it. Regina's breath caught. There was no pressure in his voice. No push. Just belief. Belief she hadn't felt from anyone in a long time. Maybe, she whispered, maybe I'll try. Charles smiled warmly. I'd love to see you do it. Nala tugged Regina's hand. Mommy, look, she squealed, holding up her flower bundle. Regina kissed her daughter's forehead, heart swelling. So pretty, sweetheart. As they continued walking, Regina realized something profound. They looked like a family again. Not a perfect one. Not a flawless one, but a healing one. And healing, she knew, was far more real. Later that afternoon, Regina took Charles and Nala to the community center, where she taught children's art classes on weekends. The moment they stepped inside, kids ran around with glitter, glue sticks, and colorful beads. Music played softly in the background. One little girl waved at Regina. Miss Regina, look what I made. Regina beamed and crouched beside her. You did amazing, Maya. Charles watched the interaction with admiration. He had known Regina was loving. He had known she cared about her neighborhood. But seeing her actively pour into these children stirred something warm inside him. He knelt beside Nala at a nearby table. Want to make a bracelet for Mommy? Yes, Nala chirped, grabbing beads with excitement. As he helped her string them together, Regina glanced over and saw them, father and daughter, quietly building something small and meaningful. For years she had imagined moments like this and then forced herself to let them go. Now they were unfolding right in front of her. A soft ache filled her chest. A good ache. A healing ache. When Nala finished the bracelet, she rushed to Regina. Mommy, for you. Regina's eyes softened as she slipped the uneven, colorful bracelet onto her wrist. I love it. Charles walked over, rubbing the back of his neck with a shy smile. She picked every bead herself. And Daddy helped, Nala announced proudly. Regina met his eyes. Thank you. He swallowed, the moment hitting him deeper than expected. Anything for you both. The next morning, Regina invited Charles to church. It wasn't a test, it was a bridge into her world. Aunt Loretta greeted them at the door with arms wide open. "Well, look at this handsome family." Charles smiled nervously. "Good morning, Mom." Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and wisdom. "Don't ma'am me. You know better. Come here." She pulled him into a hug so firm he almost stumbled. Regina stifled a laugh. The service was warm, joyful, and filled with songs that lifted the room. Regina sang softly beside Charles. Her voice, smooth, steady, soulful, washed over him like a memory he'd forgotten how to hold. Nala clapped along, sitting on Regina's lap, occasionally reaching for Charles's hand. When the service ended, Aunt Loretta pulled Charles aside. "You hurt my niece," she said plainly. Charles nodded. "Yes, I did. You broke trust that took her years to build." "Yes." "And you walked away before learning what love asks of a man." "Yes." Aunt Loretta narrowed her eyes, studying him. "Good. You're not running from the truth." She leaned closer. "So don't run from the work either." Charles swallowed. "I won't." "Good." She patted his shoulder, her sternness softening. "Because she still loves you. And love is a gift, not a guarantee. Don't forget that." "I won't," he whispered. Regina watched from a distance, a quiet smile forming as she saw the exchange. Something old was being restored, not by force, but by choice. Later that day, Regina invited Charles over for lunch. The apartment was warm with the smell of salmon cooking in the oven and mac and cheese bubbling on the stove. Nala danced around the living room with her toy giraffe, while music played softly from Regina's phone. Charles set the table, carefully placing each plate as though performing a ritual. When they finally sat down to eat, the conversation flowed naturally, stories, laughter, small memories resurfacing. Regina found herself leaning toward him without realizing it. After lunch, they watched a children's movie on the couch. Nala curled up between them, drifting in and out of sleep. Without thinking, Regina and Charles reached for the blanket at the same time, their hands brushing. She didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. They simply let their hands rest close, warm, intentional, steady. Over the next few days, their rhythm grew stronger. Charles picked Nala up from preschool twice. Regina sent him pictures of Nala's drawings. He dropped off dinner one night so she wouldn't have to cook. She surprised him with a bracelet she made, simple but meaningful. Each moment was small. But together, they rewrote the promise they once broke. We are not going backward, we are building forward. Charles held on to that promise like it was breath itself. On Friday evening, after dropping Nala off at a playdate, Charles walked Regina home. The street was quiet, and the warm glow from porch lights lined the block. As they reached her door, Regina noticed something in his expression, an excitement he was trying to contain. "What are you planning?" she asked with a teasing smile. Charles bit back a grin. "You'll see soon." "Charles," she raised an eyebrow. "Tell me." He shook his head lightly. "Not yet, but it's for you, and for Nala, and for us." Her heart fluttered. "Is it something big?" "No," he said softly. "It's something meaningful." Regina inhaled slowly, feeling warmth fill her chest. "Then I trust you." He smiled, genuine, relieved, deeply touched. Good night lingered in the air between them, soft and bittersweet. And as he walked away, his mind burned with one thought: I'm ready. Ready for the surprise. Ready for the moment. Ready for the future we almost lost. The plan was already in motion. A family moment he knew they were finally strong enough to receive. The next evening, the city was quiet in that warm Baltimore way. The sun low, the sky streaked with gold and fading orange. Regina finished her shift at Harbor Jewels, locking the glass door with practiced ease. She didn't expect anything unusual. Just another evening walk with Nala, just another bus ride home. But when she turned around, her heart paused. The boutique windows, usually dark after closing hours, were now glowing softly. Inside, the lights were dimmed to a gentle, golden hue. Candle-like LEDs lined the main walkway, creating a soft trail toward the back of the store. And Charles stood there, not in a suit, not in business armor, just Charles. Soft-eyed, hopeful, sincere. Nala, standing beside him, clapped her hands excitedly. "Mommy, surprise." Regina pressed her hand to her chest. What is all this?" Charles smiled. "A moment I should have created a long time ago. Not a grand gesture, just a true one. He walked toward her slowly, giving her time to breathe, time to understand that nothing about this was rushed or pressured. Regina stepped inside, the gentle glow of the lights wrapping around her like warmth itself. The store felt transformed, not by decoration but by intention. The place where everything once fell apart was now becoming the place where everything came together. Charles approached with something in his hand, not a ring box, not anything expensive or overwhelming. It was the locket, the same one he had given her, but now it hung from a slightly longer chain, catching the light gently. He stopped in front of her, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence, but giving her the freedom to step forward or backward. Regina didn't move away. He took a slow breath, gathering words he had waited years to speak. "Regina," he began, voice steady but full of emotion. "I spent so many years building a life I thought mattered, but none of it meant anything without you and Nala." She swallowed, eyes misting. He continued, "I'm not kneeling here with a diamond ring because I'm not asking you to relive the past. I'm not asking you to pretend we didn't break or that we didn't fail each other." He paused, eyes softening. "I'm asking you to choose the future with me. A new one, a better one." He lifted the locket slightly. "This isn't jewelry. It's a promise rewritten, a reminder that we walk forward together, not backward. If you ever doubt us, or doubt me, I want you to hold this and remember how far we've come." Regina's lips trembled, her breath quickening. "And I wanted to do this here," he added quietly, kneeling slowly, "because this is where everything changed. This is where I realized how much I'd lost, and how much I still needed to fight for." Nala giggled beside them, bouncing slightly. "Daddy's kneeling." Regina let out a teary laugh. Charles looked up at Regina, not with pressure, but with hope. "No ring," he said softly. "Just this locket, just us, just a new beginning. Will you choose this next chapter with me?" Regina's eyes filled, not from fear this time, but from overwhelming clarity. She knelt too, completely unexpected, completely natural, bringing herself to eye level with him. Her hands cupped his cheeks gently. "Charles," she whispered, "I'm not choosing the past. I'm choosing the man standing in front of me, the man who changed, the man who showed up, the father Nala adores, the partner I still love with everything in me." His breath trembled. She continued, tears slipping down freely. Yes, I will choose this life with you, not because it's perfect, but because it's ours." Nala squealed with delight. "Family hug." Regina laughed through her tears as she pulled Nala into her lap. Charles wrapped his arms around both of them, folding them together in the warmest, most complete embrace they had shared in years. Regina leaned into his shoulder. Charles kissed Nala's forehead. Nala wrapped her tiny arms around their necks. For the first time, it didn't feel fragile. It didn't feel temporary. It didn't feel like a moment that would slip away. It felt like a beginning, a real one. If this story touched your heart, hit like, comment second chances, and subscribe for more uplifting stories. Sometimes the life you're meant for finds you again, when you finally choose love over pride. The lights inside Harbor Jewels dimmed gently behind them. Outside, Baltimore moved on like every ordinary night. But inside that small boutique, under soft gold light, a family stepped into a new chapter, healed, hopeful, and holding on to each other with a love that had been tested and rebuilt beautifully.